Hello, my dear friends. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Ari Thirger, and today I'll be answering a question that has popped up from time to time since I've made that video some years back about the first Icelandic settlers. And this time also a question that has been asked quite frequently and more recently by my patrons at my Patreon, right? So let's go straight to the point, as it isn't usual in this channel. Well, from time to time, the question arises as to whether Gaelic monks or settlers from Scotland or Ireland arrived in Iceland before the Norse, the Nordic peoples. And indeed, this is still a matter of debate among many scholars in academia, right? It is the Nordic sources, actually, that gives us the most direct and concrete evidences about Icelandic early history. And these Icelandic historical sources, composed from the early 12th century onwards, indicate that the Norse arrived from Norway in 870 of the Common Era. And in fact, add to this very briefly, of course, that before them there were already some Irish hermit monks who left because they did not want to remain among the pagans. This is strange. Anyway, reports like these, almost as footnotes, have led to some truly imaginative speculation, with people even claiming on social media and on platforms such as this one, YouTube, that there was a presence of large-scale Irish settlements. However, a critical analysis of the available evidences suggests that although there are some interesting clues to this historical possibility, there is no definitive evidence to support this hypothesis, not yet anyway. So let's look at the main arguments for a pre-Norse Gaelic presence in Iceland, and let's question this, right? Given the limitations of the evidences currently available. This is not to say, mind you, this is not to say that what I am about to say is the definitive history on this subject and we can tidy it all up in here and go to sleep. But instead, it is just about all the evidences we have so far on the subject. Who knows, perhaps in the future more evidences will surface. Well, let's start with the recent archaeological excavations at Stór in eastern Iceland, which have revealed the remains of what appears to be a Norse outpost, perhaps predating the official date of Icelandic colonization, circa 870 of the Common Era, as previously stated. Now, according to archaeologist Bjarni Einarsson, this site was likely a seasonal camp used by Norse seafarers to hunt and gather resources before permanent settlement began. Radiocarbon dating suggests that activity at this site may have begun decades before the official colonization. As with any colonization process, no one ventures into the unknown on a large scale, risking losing all the funding required for supplies, people, and equipment for a permanent colonization on a large scale. There are always previous reconnaissance missions, if you take my meaning, which is why it is very common in any context of colonization to find evidences of colonial presence before the official date. However, these discoveries provide no evidence of a Gaelic presence in Iceland before the Norse. On the contrary, actually, they confirm that Scandinavian navigators already explored and enjoyed the island's natural resources, such as resources extracted from local fauna and flora, before settling permanently. We also have the argument regarding Christian crosses and artificial caves. There are several sites in the south of Iceland which have already been consecutively. Is that a word, consecutively? Bro, am I having a seizure? This is what happens when you try on the spot to translate from your native language into English. Good God. I think it's consecutively, right? It exists. Well, as I was saying, these sites in south of Iceland have been consecutively well studied, and these sites concentrating in particular on artificial caves, typical of the south, where the sandstone lends itself to being easily excavated with simple tools to create spaces, in which simple cross-shaped incisions are found. Some scholars have interpreted these crosses as possible evidences of the presence of Gaelic Christian monks who may have lived as hermits in Iceland before the arrival of the Norse. However, studies recognize something in common, that the evidences are far from conclusive. Because we have some problems with this. The crosses are stylistically very simple and do not present stylistic characteristics that could date them with certainty to the early medieval period, which means they could be from any period at all. Some may even be modern. There have, of course, been attempts to date these artificial caves by analyzing a pile of rubble buried beneath a layer of volcanic ash dating to the colonization period, again, circa 870 of the Common Era. Meanwhile, it isn't clear whether the debris actually came from human excavation of the cave or from a natural landslide prior to ash disposal. Given this uncertainty, the idea that these caves constitute evidence of a pre-Norse Gaelic presence in Iceland remains highly speculative. Lastly, of course, genetic evidence and literary sources. Several genetic studies of the modern Icelandic population have highlighted a significant component of Gaelic ancestry, especially with regard to mitochondrial, maternally inherited DNA, right? So this discovery is sometimes cited as possible evidence of a pre-Norse Gaelic presence. However, an alternative and more widely accepted interpretation is that Gaelic women were brought to Iceland in large numbers as slaves or concubines during the period of Norse settlement. This hypothesis is also supported by medieval literary sources, actually, particularly the Landnámabók, which explicitly states that many Norse settlers owned Gaelic slaves, thralls, slaves. The high percentage of Gaelic mitochondrial DNA can be explained by the demographic structure of the Norse settlement, in which Norse men took Gaelic women as wives or concubines, or both, thus leaving a lasting genetic mark on the Icelandic population. So, in conclusion, despite theories about the possible presence of Gaelic monks in Iceland before the arrival of the Norse, there is currently no convincing archaeological evidence to support this hypothesis. The outpost in eastern Iceland confirms that Norsemen were visiting the island before the official date of colonization, but in no way suggests the presence of Gaels. The crosses carved into the artificial caves cannot be dated with certainty and may be of recent origin. Finally, the genetic evidence is most plausibly explained by the large-scale importation of Gaelic women and slaves during Norse colonization, a phenomenon also attested by historical sources. Until new verifiable archaeological discoveries are made, the scholarly consensus remains unchanged. Iceland was settled and colonized by the Norse, with a significant Gaelic contribution probably occurring during, rather than before, the official colonization through slavery. I hope this video was useful, my dear friends. May it help to settle some doubts, hopefully, for now at least, until more evidences surface, if they surface at all. Thank you for your time and for listening and for watching. My dear friends, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, and as always, tack för idag. Thanks for today. Obrigado por hoje. Until we meet again, my dear friends.